Hey guys, this is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with your DraftKings running back options for week one. There's a couple guys that we're looking at here for week one, and we split them into some cash options and some tournament flyers that you guys can take a look at. The first guy I want to talk about is a cash game option I'm going to be using, and that's Jeremy Hill. Jeremy Hill is in the game. He's the starting running back now for Cincinnati. Undisputed starting running back for Cincinnati. Giovanni Bernard is going to be a guy who they're using in third down situations and as a change of pace back. Last year, in the 5 games that Jeremy Hill had 20-plus carries, he averaged over 25 fantasy points in those 5 games. So with him as the lead back here, you got to be looking for some big production. Cincinnati is favored in this game, which means that we should see a heavy dose of the ground game late in the game, which should give him close to those 20 carries. Like I said, the production he had last year with 20 carries in a game was close to 25 fantasy points. So at a price of $7,100, he makes for he makes for a great option with both safety and upside in this one for opening day. The next guy we want to talk about is Jonathan Stewart. Jonathan Stewart is another one who's now the undisputed #1 back in Carolina. Last year, towards the end of the season, when he was the undisputed back with D'Angelo Williams out, he had 4 games where he had 20-plus touches in the last 6 games of the season. In 3 of those 4 games, he scored over 20 fantasy points. So he's a good bet to get to that 20-point mark if he does get those touches today. He's only 5,800 on DraftKings for this game, which would mean that if he gets to those 20 fantasy points, he's giving you more than 3 points per $1,000 of cost, which is excellent value. Carolina is favored in this game, so they should be running late, which means we should see a lot of Stewart. And he's also the guy who gets the goal line work for him. So he has a good chance for a touchdown, which is always positive in any kind of fantasy format that you're looking at. Carolina just lost one of its biggest weapons in Kelvin Benjamin, so they're going to have to lean heavily on the run game. And that means we should see a heavy dose of Jonathan Stewart throughout this one. And if you get a heavy dose of Jonathan Stewart, we should be able to get some good production out of him, making him a safe cash game play, and also somebody to look at in our tournaments. The last 3 guys we're going to talk about, one of them I consider to be a borderline cash game tournament play, and the other 2 you'll notice are completely tournament flyers, but they are guys that I think you need to know about. The first one is Rashad Jennings. Rashad Jennings from the New York Giants is somebody who's going really under the radar right now. He's only 5,100 on DraftKings for the opening weekend, and last year he was in 11 games last year. In 1 game, he only had 1 carry. Another game late in the season, he only had 2 carries. If you back those 2 games out where he was banged up and hurt and basically shouldn't have been playing at all, he averaged 17 fantasy points per game over the other 9 games that he was in. Now, with a guy like Rashad Jennings being healthy right now, he's going to be the featured back in that offense. And when he was the featured back in that offense last year, they leaned and relied heavily on him on the ground. The Giants, as we had mentioned before, are one of the teams that ran a top 5 most plays of any team in the league last year. So there's going to be ample touches to go around. I think people are making a little bit too much out of what they're saying about Andre Williams being a guy who's going to take some carries from him, and also Shane Vereen coming in for third down situations. I do see Williams getting a few carries, and I do see Shane Vereen being a guy who plays a lot on third downs, but I still see Rashad Jennings as somebody who's going to get 15-plus touches. If he gets 15-plus touches in this game, he should wind up with 15-plus fantasy points and be a really good salary saver for you, while also giving you good production and value at the running back position. The last 2 guys I want to talk about are more tournament flyers and are going to rely on some things breaking their way between now and the start of the season. The first guy is Alfred Blue. As we all know, Arian Foster went down with an injury and is going to be out for the year. I think that Blue is going to be a very popular option on opening weekend, but I do want to temper everybody's expectations a little bit. There were 3 games last year where Blue had at least 16 carries, and in those 3 games, he never managed to score 20 fantasy points. He did get close in 2 of those games with 18 and 19 fantasy points, and the other game he was completely horrible where he finished with less than 10 fantasy points. I know you're going to hear his name mentioned a lot, especially if he is given the starting running back role for Houston, but that Houston offense is pretty bad. I have a feeling that they're going to get blown out the first week of the season, and that could mean that there's a lot of passing in the second half, and we might not even see Blue get to those 15 or 16 carries. Now, again, at a price of $3,600, he's definitely worth a flyer, definitely somebody you should look for. If he does get a touchdown and runs for 60 yards, he's going to give you good value and, be a guy that you want on your rosters. I just don't know if I see him having a huge upside where he can get you 25 or 30 points and really help you win a big tournament match. One guy who I think does have that kind of upside, but is not a shoo-in to be the guy who's in there, is Darren McFadden. I don't know about Joseph Randle. Right now, he's hurt again. Excuse me. He's hurt again. He has an injury to his arm. I think he either pulled a pectoral muscle or did something to his forearm. But this is now the second time he's already done it in the preseason, and he's missing out on the snaps in the preseason that he would really need in order to be the starting running back for this team. Darren McFadden has stepped in and is picking up the first-team reps in practice, so he could be a guy that's in line to get the start in Week 1. McFadden is only $4,400 on DraftKings, and again, that Dallas offensive line is one of the best in the league. I'm not saying that anybody could run behind them, but if you take a guy like McFadden, who does have a little bit of talent and has, flashed at points in his career, and you give him a very good offensive line to run behind and enough volume for him to really do something, I think he can get you a nice return. He's only going to need to get to about 13 or 14 points. And considering that he's somebody who has decent hands that can catch a couple passes out of the backfield as well, I think he's going to be able to put it all together if he is given that number one running back role, which, again, doesn't even completely rely on a Randle injury. So far in the preseason, he's actually looked better and outperformed Randle. So it could be a chance that he gets to be the one who gets first crack at the RB1 spot for that Dallas team. If you put a solid, decent running back behind that very, very good offensive line against a Giants team that's pretty weak on defense right now, their best rush defender was JPP, and it looks like he's not going to be in there for them at the beginning of the season because of his injury. So I think that there's a good chance that Darren McFadden gets the RB1 spot and has a pretty big game Week 1 against the Giants. It's a hot take. It's a bold call, but it's one that I'm going to be sticking by until we get a little more certainty about whether McFadden or Randle is going to be the running back in Week 1. So those are some fantasy options for you to consider at the running back spot on DraftKings for Week 1. Thank you for joining us here at RotoCurve. And as always, stay classy, DFS.